and good evening. I'm Melisa Idris. Welcome to Consider This. This is the show where we want you to consider and then reconsider what you know of the news of the day. Food security often makes headlines during price hikes or crises, but the real work of ensuring a secure food system happens long before the supermarket shelves are empty. What will it take to secure Malaysia's food future? And are we thinking about food security in the right way? Well, that's the conversation we aim to have today. On the show is Dr. Sarena Che Omar, who is the CEO of PNB Research Institute, which is a policy research think tank funded by Permodalan Nasional Berhad. Dr. Sarena, it's good of you to be here with me today. Thank you for being here.
Pleasure.
And welcome to the show.
Sure.
So let's talk a little bit about Malaysia's food security challenges. When you think about some of the biggest challenges we face, what are they? And we have a blueprint, or we have the Malaysia's food security blueprint in the works. So how does the blueprint address the challenges that you consider to be most pressing?
Okay, Melissa. So first of all, before we dive deeper into food security, I'd like to first us to get to the basics.
Okay.
What is food security? And I always like to tell people that food security is multidimensional. It is not just about farming rice. Rice is important, farming is important, but there's also other parts to it. So there's availability, whether the food is available, affordability, whether you can afford the food, utilization, whether you know how to cook the food and eat the food, stability, which means you have a stable supply of food. And then, for example, recently they've added agency, which means an individual's what do you call that, known or informed decision in choosing what to eat, as well as sustainability. So these are all really important factors of food security. And to address food security, you cannot address one part. You got to go through it everywhere. Okay, so let's go back to the challenges. So one of the biggest challenges in Malaysia is climate change. And there's two parts to climate change. The first part is what we call mitigation, which is like net zero, how do we reduce greenhouse gases? So that's one part. But what's really pressing and important for Malaysia's food security is the adaptation or resilience, which means our farmers in the northern states of Malaysia, are they resilient to a sudden flood? So for example, I think YB Mat Sabu announced in December 2024, the flood, it cost the country 160 million of rice damages.
Wow.
And that's because most of our rice is situated in the northern state.
Right.
So one incident of climate change or weather disaster, there goes our risk to food security. So the answer to that is, of course, we need to diversify our location. That's number one, which means that you can't put all your eggs in one basket.
Okay.
So we need MARDI to, for example, come up with suitable soil. So you can't just grow rice anywhere else, right? So a soil that's good for oil palm may not be good for rice. So what you got to do is we need MARDI or research institutes to go around Malaysia and find a good spot for rice. So I think Sabah and Sarawak, for example, is a good way to diversify our risk portfolio. The other thing that I think is really important to diversify our risks in terms of managing issues like this is not to just focus on certain imported food.
Okay.
For example, we import a lot of meat, right? And we import a lot of meat from India. So import per se, that's another topic that we can elaborate later.
Yeah, okay.
But what I want to say is that what about our buffaloes that grows really well in Malaysia? They can withstand the Malaysian weather.
Right.
Another example that people don't realize, growing cabbages and carrots in Malaysia is very, what I would call them, sensitive to our weather. But throw a serai, throw a pandan leaf, throw an ulam, it will flourish. So Malaysia's food security, we really should promote local food like ubi kayu. That's another thing I wanted to talk about, ubi kayu. It's always associated with war.
Yes, like
our grandparents.
Yes, it's like ration food, right? Food,
right.
Food during tough times.
Correct.
Yeah.
But it's an excellent source of fiber and
delicious.
Carbohydrate. And delicious. Right. So why are we not, promoting that? So these are some of the things. So another challenge besides climate change is, I have to admit, we do have an aging population of farmers. So we have older farmers. Now that's not a bad thing. This is normal.
Yes.
This is the way the development of a country happens. What we need, Melisa, is not more farmers. We need, if let's say we have 100 old farmers, we need to transition to 50 younger but more productive agropreneurs or techpreneurs, and that's what we need for the country. So I'm not saying aging farmer is a weird situation. It's a normal transition, but it's a challenge that we need to bring in. And how do we solve that? Now, I always tell people, you know, have you heard of kebun-kebun bangsa, kebun-kebun?
Yes,
And
like a community
garden, right?
Yes.
Some people say kebun-kebun bangsa is, that's a city thing. It doesn't address full nationwide food security. I tell them, they're allowing kids from schools to go there. What does that happen? It inspires kids, right? It creates a nurturing environment. And that's absolutely important for the country to have that transition from many old farmers to younger generation of farmers. So those are some of the challenges.
You sparked the love for
the nurturing sense.
For very early. Okay, so you've laid out the kind of the key, the most pressing challenges we have, but and I'm sure these are known challenges. We've had to deal with this for quite a while. But is there a plan? Is there a plan to address these challenges? For instance, to think about food supply and the stability of it, the diversity of the location of where we're growing our crops, and the transition to a younger population. Do we have a plan that tackles these issues?
Okay, so I would say there is a blueprint coming up. It'll come out, inshallah, in a few months' time. I can't say for sure what's going to come because it's still in the process. Is there a plan? I do believe so. You know, how effective it's going to be, I can't answer that. But I do think that a lot of the players, the policymakers, they are aware of what I'm saying. And I think I'm hopeful that we will get things going in that direction.
Okay.
And another thing, when you talk about a plan, what we need, and I would like to suggest that to the blueprint, and I hope they're looking into that, is we need a food security agency or a food security research center, some kind of an overlooking entity. Because the thing with food security, it's multidimensional, right? So you've got Ministry of Health looking into nutrition, you've got Ministry of Natural Resource and Environment, we've got Ministry of Agriculture. So we've got all these ministries, and it would be good to have some entity that sort of has an interest that overlooks everything.
So there's cohesion, there's a kind of cohesive policy looking at everything. Okay, that's interesting. You mentioned the way we import foods.
Sure.
And I think there's a lot of kind of hand-wringing around Malaysia's rising food import food bill, right? Talk to me a little bit about that. Are there strategies to reduce reliance on food imports? Do we need to beef up our local food production and ensure self-sufficiency?
Sure, you got it.
Okay.
I love your question. And there's a reason why I love that question, because there's always this thinking, and I really hope the audience can learn a little bit or be inspired by this. Import per se is not bad, per se, right? So I'll give you an example. We import rice about 40%, right? But we grow the rest, 60%, right? But like I said, is that a risk? It is a risk if that 60%, everything is grown in the northern state, right? If you import 40%, but you diversify your import, you import a little bit from Vietnam, a little bit from Thailand, then you should be all right. Okay, So what areas are we concerned about? Meat, we import from a certain country, more than 80% from India. We might want to consider diversifying our import source. The other thing would be our feed product, you know, the feed that we use to feed
chickens.
Everything comes from Argentina and Brazil. That's it. So that is a risk. So it's not import per se, because I've actually studied our import behavior. Talking about Bennett's Law, I actually see an increase in avocados, salmon, chocolates, and oyster. Is that a bad thing? It's not. Because in Bennett's Law, it is about as countries progress, diversity of consumption happen. We tend to reduce our consumption of starchy food. So Malaysia in the 1960s, we consume about 50% starch from rice. Today it's 30%, and the trend is going down. I'm not saying we will stop eating rice. We love our rice.
Yes.
But what I'm trying to say is that we are beginning to diversify our portfolio.
So Bennett's Law is, as a country progresses, they are
economic development.
Okay.
We tend to consume less starchy food, more meat, more dairy, more vegetables, and sometimes, well, in most cases, more processed food.
Okay.
So that's the bad thing.
Okay.
So what I'm trying to say is that we are diversifying our portfolio. So that's what I mean by import per se is not bad.
Okay.
It's how you import, it's how you eat, right? I can give you an example. Let's say everything is fully produced in Malaysia. Let's imagine that. We have all our food and it's all healthy ulam. We've got all the fish, poultry, everything. But if your child only wants Maggi mee and nuggets, and you only feed your child Maggi mee and nuggets because it's a choice, that's still a food security issue. So that comes with a whole issue of awareness.
Is that the agency you were talking about in the beginning?
Yes, the agency, it's the choices that you make, it's the utilization as well.
Utilization, yes.
It's about how you know how to cook, right? So I know ulam, but if I don't know how to eat it, it may be growing everywhere in my house.
And you won't
eat it. And I will still eat maybe something that's not as nutritious, potato chips, for example. So these are things where I always tell people, yes, import is not good if you import everything from one country, and that's your main food consumption. But if it's oyster, you know, if it's salmon, and that contributed to our huge import bill as well, maybe that's all right. But if we're importing everything, for example, cabbage, onions, carrots, and potatoes and meat, those are where we are importing a lot and we're importing from certain country, then maybe that's not a good thing.
Okay, so how do you gauge right now where we are in terms of our reliance on imported foods? Do we need to adjust anything? Where do we stand currently, and where do you see how we might need to tweak things? Okay,
so for rice, I think we are quite okay, but if we can improve local production a little bit more, that would be good. For meat, I think we are over-reliant on import. For beef, for example, and I think we should consider local cows, local buffaloes.
Buffaloes, you mentioned.
I think that's really something to think about. Dairy is all right. Vegetables, we do rely a lot, especially cabbages and carrots. But most of our leafy greens comes from Cameron.
Kangkong,
At kangkong, we're 100% self-sufficient. So is sawi, so is spinach. So we're not too bad in that sense. Fruits, actually, Melisa, we are pretty excellent. Most of our local tropical fruits are we're almost 100% self-sufficient. Of course, if you talk about strawberries and oranges,
no,
we're not.
We have to import those.
But does that mean we should grow it? No, right?
Yeah,
we shouldn't.
It's not the right
It's not the right environment. Even if we do it, we might not be economical. It might cost a lot, and it might cost the environment a lot.
Yeah.
So those are things that we should be aware of.
Okay, all right. So when you look at all the multi-dimensional nature of food security, and part of that you also talked about nutrition, right? Are we eating the right foods, the most nutritious foods? When we think about that aspect of it, how do we incorporate that into a wider food security policy? Is that an afterthought when we think about Malaysia's broader health and nutrition goals? Can that be incorporated at the very core of food security?
Absolutely, it is, and it should be, and that is why I do hope that the blueprint will look into this. And of course, you have the Ministry of Health looking into it. But I really hope that all the ministries, because it's Ministry of Agriculture that's working on the blueprint, but there's a cooperation going on. Now let's talk about that. Nutrition in Malaysia. Stunting and malnutrition and obesity in child is actually, there's not some good numbers.
Yeah.
Would you like me to say out some numbers?
Sure.
Okay, we've got prevalence of stunting among children under 5. In 2022, it's 21 according to the National Health and Morbidity Survey.
Well, that's 1 in 5.
Yes. Baseline at 2015, it was 17%. So it has gone up.
Okay.
Whereas the WHO's target is that we should reduce it by 50%. And when we talk about prevalence of overweight among children of 5 years, it's at 5.6% in 2022, whereby the WHO target is at 3%. And here's another thing. So when we talk about food security and malnutrition and obesity and such forth, there's one thing, including it in a nationwide blanket survey, blanket policy. But one thing that I always want to try to emphasize is that you also have localized, unique issues. So for example, Pahang is the highest in child stunting, whereas Malacca is the highest in the incidence of child overweight. So I would think then food security at the state level should then target based on these different scenarios that's happening.
Wow, and the data, we also need to kind of look at the granular data to understand why.
Yes, so it's not sort of blanket policy that looks into. I think we should go down to the state level at least when we try to address food security, especially given that you also have different weather situation, right? In the northern states, you've got the what you call the flood happening, and you've got a different situation in the middle segment of the peninsula. Sabah and Sarawak has different challenges, so those things should be looked into.
Okay, well, some of the challenges that we're facing in terms of food security can become more pressing in the near future. So when you see Malaysia's food security evolving in the next, say, 5 to 10 years, where are you hoping it will go? What are the key points of evolution that you're hoping we will focus on in the next 5 to 10 years within, when the blueprint is in place already?
Okay, so you've got the blueprint coming in. So the blueprint will be there for the next 5 to 10 years. And you've got the change in the way the country works or the population and the consumption, right? Yeah. So what I'm trying to say is that it's not the blueprint. The blueprint has an impact, but there's also a change in the consumption pattern that the blueprint has to be aware of to adjust to it. So one thing that I'm talking about is, again, we need to move beyond just production, just looking at food security as carbohydrate supplying rice.
Yeah.
So looking at it,
we
5
do
to 10
focus on that, right?
We do, which is important. I've got a PhD in rice. I love my rice, but I'm beginning to realize that you've got the issue of, is your chicken sustainable? Is it full of hormones? Is your vegetables free from pesticides? So 5 to 10 years time, we will see again the Bennett's Law coming in. So we see a more, I assume Malaysia will grow and prosper. So we have consumers that will be more aware of their food. That's the change in the consumption behavior, right? So you will tend to have consumers who will be more aware, right? I think we have that now, right?
Yeah.
People will be like, oh, I want my vegetables to be free of pesticides. Yeah. And now people are willing to pay a premium for it. My hope for the country is that in 5 to 10 years' time, it is the norm.
Oh, wow.
You don't need to pay a premium in order to get a safe food for the people. Right, that should be it. And of course, animal cruelty, if we were to have a chicken poultry farm, some cases, if you're aware, they just throw the waste, the effluent into the river, it pollutes the river. Of course, if you want the farmers to comply, that means there's a premium price, right? So if you go to the shop, and I'll share this with the audience as well, if you go to the stores, any supermarkets, the 12 dozen cartons, if you look, some of them have a HACCP, MUSTI, and MyGap certification. Yeah. It's a little bit more pricey, but I hope someday that will be the norm, that it's not pricey anymore. Everyone can enjoy a certified food that's safe and sustainable for the people.
I've always wondered about the price differential for a commodity like eggs, but it's because of the certification as well.
Absolutely. But when it becomes the bulk, when there's more people buying, then of course it can get cheaper. Right, so
no, I'm excited for this future that you've painted for
us. I'm always optimistic.
This is a food future I also wish for Malaysia. Absolutely. So how do we get there, Dr. Sarena, when we think about the risks and the obstacles that could prevent us from making this future happen? What are you most concerned about? What should we be watching out for, or mitigate at least some of the risks and obstacles? So,
I mean, some risk, it's something that it's the people, it's the choice of the people, right? They need to make better choices. So go for MyGap, Good Agricultural Practices Malaysia. You have challenges in terms of the implementation of the blueprint. Let's go into that. How do we spend a lot, I think the ministry spend a lot of time, and I've been involved in it, in looking at, reviewing the report, and I can assure you a lot has been done to come up with that report. It's a matter of, can we all work together to make it happen, right? So there are some challenges, for example, coordination between the ministries. Now, it's easy for us to say ministries need to coordinate. It's not an easy thing. It's really difficult if you think about it. There's ministries with their own objectives, their own targets, their own area, and they have to now work with other ministries, sharing their KPIs and all. It's not easy, but for the blueprint and for food security to be successful in Malaysia, I hope that there can be coordination among the ministries. Right. That's one thing.
Is that when you talked about having this kind of one coordinating
Yes.
food security research body?
Yes, that's right.
That would go a long way in helping kind of the ministries have more coordination and let's work together to achieve this food future that we so desire.
So there is, Melissa, I just wanted to explain, there's three, right? Number one, coordination. Number two is consumer awareness, which we talked about. Number three is about wage stagnation. So here's the thing. PNB Research Institute, we are looking into data on wages. And one of the things, and not just me, I've got colleagues and ex-colleagues look into it. And in Malaysia, we do have an issue of wages among the workforce that's not going up. And you put that against inflation, food inflation that's going up. So that's another challenge for us moving forward, is we need to address wage stagnation. Because for people to afford healthy food, we need to make sure their wages grow. So some people are very privileged where their employers increase their wages every year automatically 3 to 4% to beat the inflation, but not everybody gets that. So that is another issue, I think, that we need to address.
Well, that's a really great point. And that brings me, I guess, to my next question about how food security is not just the responsibility or the role of the government to ensure. Right. Talk to me about how private sector can also play a role in ensuring the country's food security, and also the public. I mean, we want to see this this future for our food security, but how do we get there in terms of our power as consumers, the choices that we make?
Sure. So there's two things here, right? There's the public and there's the private sector.
Yes.
Okay. So we've been talking about the government, the blueprint and all that.
Yes, we can't just depend on the government alone.
Yeah, there's only so much they can do, right? So the public, which is what I told you about, consumer power is very strong. If nobody wants to buy a responsibly grown chicken egg, there's never going to be responsibly grown chicken egg, right?
It will never become the norm.
It will never become the norm. So we need consumers to start, those who can make a choice right now, do go for good agricultural practices, sustainable practices. Consumers need to ask, hey, where was my vegetable source? Is it done responsibly? What about the prawns? Because, for example, there's cultivated prawns, right? And there's a huge issue with when you culture or when you grow prawns or fish
in a farm,
and you would just let go of the waterways, and that pollutes the rivers. That's why our rivers are so polluted. So prawn growers, fish growers, tilapia growers, do you ask when you do go to the shop, right?
So we have to get educated.
We need the public to do that. Now, I want to go to the private sector. And when I mean by private sector, I am going to bypass private sector within the food industry. They're doing stuff, right? We are talking about the private sector, such as the MNCs, even the GLCs, the government-linked companies, the banks. I'm talking about corporates, right? Corporates. What can they do? So we have a lot of very good social enterprises. We have a lot of startups. We have a lot of NGOs. So I'll give you an example. Abundant Ventures in Malaysia, in KL. We have the Hope Worldwide Malaysia in Sentul Raya. They are doing urban farming for troubled community, not troubled, but underprivileged communities, and they need help. So we can have the CIMB or Maybank or any company coming in and let's do a CSR with them. Or for example, you have Dumo Wongi in Sabah, which helps housewives in Sabah to grow herbs that they sell those herbs. So we could have, for example, hotels buying these herbs, right? And we have the things like Langit, which is really another fantastic organization in Sarawak, where they work with rural folks, where they grow their own heirloom rice, and they help to market them. And when they sell it at a premium price, they bring it back to the farmers. Isn't that fantastic?
Wow.
So private sector can help. So CSRs look into this and try to help. So that's something you can do.
They need a boost, and private sector can come in for that boost.
Another way the private sector can come in is that when you have, for example, I'm not picking on companies. I'm just giving an example, right?
Of how they can be part of this.
Let's say I have a company, a CSR that helps to volunteer to do the kebun community or something like that. What happens? I bring my family and my employees there. They start feeling nurturing, the nurturing environment. Oh, I'm growing something. I feel connected. I feel, oh, there's goats. I'm rearing the goats. This creates a community where they are more relate more close to agriculture and food security. That means, for example, if they retire, if I'm an accountant and I'm done doing accounting, I want to go back to my kampung in Pematang Pauh and I want to grow rice, but because of my accounting background, I may be a more competitive and dynamic farmer, and I may go back and be a very good farmer.
Wow.
So I think we have a lot of that in Kuala Lumpur now, where a lot of corporate people who are starting to do all these things, and they might do it for their for their retirement career.
As a retirement plan.
Or they may inspire their kids
to do it.
Yeah. So I think there's a lot the private sector can do.
Oh, I didn't even consider that, but what a great point to make. Sarena, thank you so much for being on the show with me, sharing some of these really important considerations. I think you've helped us really think differently about food security, and some of these questions I think will stay with us, and hopefully we'll get educated as consumers ourselves. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
That's all we have for you on this episode of Consider This. I'm Melisa Idris signing off for the evening. Thank you so much for watching. Good night.